Some companies fail, others collapse, and then there are the rare few that implode. They become these black holes of greed, just pulling fortunes, futures, and all of our faith into a void of pure deception. This is the story of one of those companies. You know, the end, when it came without warning. It started as just a whisper, then it grew into a roar, and then, suddenly, just silence. That was a warning, sent from deep inside the machine to the man sitting at the very top. A warning that was just ignored. At the time, it was the single largest corporate bankruptcy in American history. A titan of industry, just gone. Reduced to one single brutal headline. 5,000. That's how many employees were summoned to a meeting that day. They were told that the paycheck they'd just gotten in their hands was going to be their last. Oh, and it was 3 weeks before Christmas. So how does a company worth $70 billion just disappear? To understand the fall, you have to first understand the lie. And it was a lie so audacious, it changed the rules of business forever. And, it all started simply enough. Back in 1985, two pretty ordinary pipeline companies merged. Yeah, Enron began as a stodgy, regulated business. All they did was move physical gas through physical pipes. It was predictable, safe. Honestly, it was boring. But see, under its CEO, Kenneth and his star protege, Jeffrey Skilling, they didn't just see pipes and gas. They saw a market. They saw a chance to trade energy not as a physical thing, but as an idea, an abstract concept. This was Skilling's grand vision. He called it the gas bank. The idea was that Enron wouldn't just sell gas anymore. No, it would become the Wall Street of energy. It would trade futures, derivatives. It would literally trade risk itself. So how do you prove a revolutionary new idea is profitable before it's actually made a single dime? Well, the answer is you don't. You invent the profits. They used an accounting trick called mark-to-market. Now, imagine you sign a 20-year contract. With mark-to-market, you can claim all 20 years of projected profits on day one. It was basically a license to print money. Money that didn't exist yet. And, as it turns out, might never exist at all. So suddenly, the only thing that mattered was perception. To keep that stock price flying high, they just had to keep signing deals, booking these imaginary profits, and feeding this myth of unstoppable growth. But myths always come with a cost, and very real losses were starting to pile up. And this is where the story turns from just hubris to outright criminal conspiracy. And it was led by a young, incredibly ambitious CFO named Andrew Fastow. So how do you hide $1 billion of debt from your investors, from the world? You don't make it disappear. You just move it. You move it somewhere nobody thinks to look. To hide all this debt, Fastow built a maze, a labyrinth of over 3,000 off-the-books companies. These were called special purpose entities, or SPEs, and their structures were designed to be impossible to understand. Basically, Enron would use these SPEs to buy its own failing assets, hiding the losses and debt inside these shadow companies, while Enron itself looked perfectly healthy. It was a financial magic trick. Now, to keep all this technically legal, there was a rule. The SPSEs had to have a tiny amount of investment from an independent outside party. But there was nothing independent about it. Fastow secretly put his own subordinate in charge of them. using money that was funneled from Enron itself. The entire setup was a complete sham. Inside Enron's gleaming Houston tower, all this pressure to feed the machine, it created a culture of pure, unadulterated fear. 15%. That was the number that haunted every single employee. They had this brutal performance review system called rank and yank. The bottom 15% of employees were fired every 6 months, no matter what, no exceptions. A culture like that, it didn't just encourage fraud, it demanded it. To avoid getting fired, you had to produce massive, immediate profits. And with mark-to-market accounting, the easiest way to do that was to lie. Collaboration died. Betrayal became how you survived. And the fraud was just allowed to grow like a cancer. By the year 2000, you could see the cracks starting to form. The dot-com bubble was bursting, and a lot of Enron's investments were bleeding money. Fasto needed a final, desperate firewall to hide the truth. So he created 4 new SPEs. He called them the Raptors. Now look at the logic here. It's completely circular. These companies were supposed to protect Enron from its bad investments. But the only thing backing them up, the only collateral they held, was Enron's own inflated stock. So if Enron's stock ever fell, the Raptors would be worthless and the whole system would collapse. Enron was insuring itself with itself. It was a house of cards propping up another house of cards. But someone inside was finally connecting the dots. Someone who realized the entire empire was built on a lie, and that the whole house of cards was starting to tremble. After CEO Jeff Skilling just abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons, Vice President Sharon Watkins saw her opening. She laid out the entire deception in a 7-page memo, sent it directly to the company's founder, Ken Lay, and practically begged him to look into it. Her words were a prophecy. It was the last chance for the company to come clean before it was too late. It was a chance that Ken Lay just wasn't going to take. And after that, the unraveling happened with breathtaking speed. The second the market lost faith, the entire illusion that they had built over a decade, it just evaporated, gone in an instant. From the day Skilling resigned to total annihilation took just 110 days. October 16th, the company admits to a massive loss it can no longer hide. Just days later, on the 22nd, the SEC launches an investigation. By December 2nd, it was all over. All that hidden debt came pouring out, the stock price became worthless, and the game was up. Now, the architects of the fraud couldn't hide behind their complex accounting and teams of lawyers anymore. Now, they had to face the public and the courts. So what happened to them? Well, Ken Lay was convicted, but he died of a heart attack before he could ever be sentenced. Jeff Skilling served 12 years in prison. Andy Fastow, the mastermind of the shadow companies, he served 6. And Arthur Andersen, their accounting firm, once one of the biggest in the world, was convicted of obstruction of justice and, for all intents and purposes, just ceased to exist. You know, a scandal this big, it leaves scars. Not just on the thousands of lives it destroyed, but on the very rules of the game itself. In the aftermath, new laws were actually written. Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which forced CEOs to personally sign off on their company's financial reports. And for the very first time, corporate whistleblowers got federal protection from being fired. Enron taught us that the line between innovation and outright fraud can be terrifyingly thin. It proved that a culture that prizes profit above absolutely everything else will eventually consume itself. So the question we're left with isn't really how it happened, but whether it could happen all over again.